All right, let's say our blessing for studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kisanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu b'nei. Praise to you, Lord of God, rule the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah.
I want to correct one thing. They do not, I just remembered, they do not celebrate Easter or Christmas, Naomi, either one. Because it's pagan, they said.
All right, thank you. Norma, would you read about Lot's wife on 1 foot, please?
Lot's wife on 1 foot. Abraham went to the land of Israel with his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot. There wasn't enough grass for both Abraham and Lot's flocks. So Abraham offered Lot to pick where he wanted to go, and Abraham would go the other way. Lot chose the green pastures of Sodom, not knowing or not caring that Sodom was inhospitable to foreigners. Lot married a woman whom the Midrash named Edith, Tekuma Buber Vayera, Sefer HaYashar Vayara, Pirkei the Rabbi Eliezer in Sodom. Whether she was swayed by Lot's Abrahamic values or stayed true to the values of Sodom is up to each reader to decide, and that decision will determine how you interpret her actions.
Great, thank you. So we have some background on Lot, who's Abraham's nephew, how he ended up in Sodom, or Sodom in the Hebrew, and a little bit of introduction to his wife, who does not have a name in the Torah, but the Midrash decided to call her Edith or Edith, depending on how you want to transliterate that. And given that she was born in Sodom, but was married to Lot, her values could have gone either way, and each person will have to figure out what they think how they think she was making decisions as you try to interpret her actions. Questions at this point?
We have enough knowledge about her actions, or apparently no writing, but at least about her actions to base our decision on anything.
We
know
are
that she turned around to look back.
We're going to see everything that there is in the Torah about her in the course of the next 3 acts. The Midrash has other things to say, but we will see what the Torah has to say. All right, let's jump in. Steve, would you read Act 1, please?
The 2 messengers arrived in Sodom in the evening, as Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, and bowing low with his face to the ground, he said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house to spend the night and bathe your feet. Then you may be on your way early." But they said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly, so they turned his way and entered his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. They had not yet lain down when the town council and the milita of Sodom, significantly and influentially alike, the whole assembly without exception, gathered about the house. And they shouted at Lot and said to him, "Where are the ones who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may be intimate with them." So Lot went out to them to the entrance, shut the door behind him, and said, "I beg you, my friends, do not commit such a wrong. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you please, but do not do anything to the others, since they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, stand back, the fellow, they said, came here as an alien, and already he acts the ruler. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. And they pressed hard against the householder, against Lot, and moved forward to break the door. But the agents stretched out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And the people who were at the entrance of the house, low and high alike, they were struck with blinding light, so that they were helpless to find the entrance.
Whoa.
Okay. All right, and some context,
Pretty
please.
strong. Oh,
Steve, can you read our context also, please?
This is from the biblical book of Genesis. The angels who are visiting Lot have just come from Abraham and Sarah, where they announced the birth of Isaac. Abraham has then argued with God about not destroying Sodom if 10 good people can be found there.
Okay. And our first question.
At what points could this part of the story have been turned out differently?
Thank you. All right.
Well, Lot might not have been generous when sitting at the gate and let them go sleep in the square.
Mm-hmm. Good. What else?
Lot could have been just as bad as, well, I guess he kind of is not, definitely not acting nicely in this story, but we could say that he could have been even worse by not allowing the angels any refuge at all. He could have like turned on them in the same way that the townspeople did, like explicitly.
Mm-hmm.
What about the fact that, well, I mean, while Lot is having this interchange there in Sodom, is his uncle at the same time arguing with God about saving the people of Sodom, or how does that chronology kind of work, David?
That's a good question. I believe the chronology is that first Abraham talks to God in chapter 18, maybe. And then after that, yeah, chapter 18, Abraham talks to God. In verse 22, it says, the men went on from there to Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. So the angels who are appearing in human form are en route to Sodom. And while they're on their way, Abraham is talking to God. So if that conversation had turned out differently, then the angels would have presumably gone somewhere else. The whole thing would have been called off.
Well, it seems to me that had Lot not done what he did, that his family would have perished.
Hmm.
There wouldn't be any Amorites or the other group.
Moabites, yeah.
Moabite.
I mean, there's so many places it could have changed. Those men could have raped the daughters.
Mm-hmm.
It seems very strange that Lot even suggested that.
Well, it may seem, I'm sorry, go ahead, Hinda.
No. So in the previous paragraph, we learned that Lot chose a different place to settle from Abraham. I mean, he did that because he was greedy. He saw that he had economic potential with the green pastures of Sodom. And he basically didn't care about the behavior of Sodom, but he knew about it. And he went to live there anyway because of the money, the economic promise that he saw there. And I know according to some commentaries that I've read about this, it's also that he walked away from God while doing this. And he walked in different directions from Abraham in every sense. And maybe that was the beginning of God's plan. That he was angry with Lot. Now, he didn't punish Lot directly, but indirectly. I could see what God's anger was developing earlier in this story.
So a word about Midrash. Midrash is rabbinic commentary, rabbinic stories trying to explain the stories in the text. There's also halachic Midrash, which is trying to like basically write sermons that are anchored in the text. The classical Midrash was written by rabbis. People continue to write Midrashim today. And the perspective that you take in the Midrash depends on what point you want to make about Lot or any character that you're writing about. So you can write a Midrash where you say Lot knew about the evils of Sodom and chose to go there knowing that and chose to walk away from God. You can equally write a Midrash that says Lot saw the pastors, was interested in what he perceived to be best for him materially, did not do his research as to what he was getting himself into. And then once he got there, decided that, and found out, he decided that, you know, I can withstand this and I'll be okay, sort of like Noah surrounded by people who are not so good. So as long as a Midrash doesn't flatly contradict what's in the text of the Torah, it's a kosher Midrash. So there are the classical Midrashim, which also seek to explain the ending of the story that we're going to see. But a person could easily write another Midrash from a totally different perspective. I don't remember who it was, but somebody I heard quote on the radio said something to the effect of the sign of a first-rate mind is the ability to hold two opposite perspectives at the same time. Something along those lines. So knowing what the classical Midrashim say is helpful, and we'll meet some of them, and feeling like you have the ability to write your own Midrash based off of your own interpretation, as long as it doesn't contradict what's in the text, helps to empower you to carry on the chain of textual interpretation and discussion. And with that, back to you guys. How else could this have been different?
If the population of Sodom was so inhospitable to foreigners, how was he able to obtain a house in the city? I think they wouldn't have sold him one. So
That's a perfectly good question.
couldn't buy a house there. That would have changed the story tremendously.
It's true.
And the other question I would have is, did God concentrate on Sodom and their evilness, if you will, because Lot was there? Would he have ignored them if Lot hadn't gone there?
The Midrash also wonders that and has answers. But at the same time, just because a rabbi came up with an answer many centuries ago does not mean that we could not come up with a different answer.
I'd like to return back to Norma's comment about Lot offering up his daughters to save the visitors. And it feels like, that's what Abraham did with Sarah when they were going to see the Pharaoh. So I don't know if that was a very acceptable thing to do at that time. But, Abraham said to Sarah, pretend you're my sister, not my wife. And Pharaoh said, oh, I like this beautiful woman. She's not married. I'd like her.
That's a really good connection. And I'm wondering if it makes a difference whether it's to save your own life or to save the life of your guests. It might not. The connection is still a valid connection.
Related. Oh, sorry.
I was say that raises the point when Lot offered his daughters. What did his wife think about that at the point?
Is there any midrash on Lot's conduct, on him offering his daughters up? It seems really abhorrent to, I think, modern sensibilities.
I don't know, but I will find out and send it in a follow-up email.
My only comment on that, based off of what I know, is that in the ancient Near Eastern context this is written in, and also the pre-giving of the Torah time period that this is, sort of floating around within the narrative. This is a highly, extremely patriarchal society. So to an extent, I'm not really surprised, just because of the fact that the women were not treated very highly in ancient Near East and in many other ancient Near Eastern civilizations, at least, and especially not within Canaan, at least until the Torah was given, from what I understand. So there might be some societal context differences. Also, I don't think the narrative assumes that Lot is a good person to begin with, like at all, or even really that Abraham or the other patriarchs were always morally upstanding people. Anyways, the prophets do sin, even though Lot, as far as I understand, is not described as a prophet. Maybe that can kind of explain why we have such a, what I would think of it also as like a extremely negative description of the person's character here. I mean, later down the line, actually, I don't know if I should say that, but I don't want to spoil one of the latter.
Right, so save it. We'll come back to we'll have Act 2 and Act 3.
Yeah. I'll just say like this. Maybe we ought not assume that Lot is a good person. That's all.
Okay.
Oh, and about the ancient Near East thing, is that also correct, David, from my understanding?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
It's not just ancient. If you look at, if you kind of remember reading about Afghanistan and Pakistan and sort of I don't remember what those areas are geographically called, but even today, if you find shelter in someone's home, they have that obligation to take care of you, to protect you. And you are in effect sheltered and safe.
Yep. All right. Which all brings us to our second question. What should Lot have done when the mob was searching against him to bring out his guests?
Probably not gone outside.
Hmm. Other thoughts?
Well, the thing is that what Gabriel was saying, that maybe who said Lot was such a good person, but he looks like a good person when he tells my friends, do not commit such a wrong. But then what he does with his daughters makes you question whether or not he really was such a good person. So he's really good and bad wrapped up in one man.
Well, we think of Abraham as being a very good person. Look what he did with his wife.
With Sarah, right? So he
No,
maybe
not with Sarah. I was
Yeah.
thinking with his other wife and his son Ishmael. He threw him out
right.
into the desert.
We don't know what their moral code was, but it certainly was different than what we believe in.
All right, next question. It's clear that the people of Sodom do not value providing hospitality. How might Lot's wife, Edith, have felt about Lot offering hospitality to the visitors?
I guess that might depend on, remember the question was raised early on, does she take on more characteristics of the people of Sodom or,
Lot, yeah.
or Lot's family? So, I mean, I guess her attitude could go either way depending on, which of her moral codes that she decides to use, right? Or apply.
Right.
Or does she defer to her husband in these matters?
I imagine that she was very unhappy that her husband put their family in danger.
Or they offer their daughters. I mean, she's the mother. I mean, that's sure she wasn't crazy about that idea.
Can we put that question, number 3, somewhere in perspective? Because you're lumping all of the people of Sodom together. And if you look at things today, there are many people here in our country who are welcoming foreigners and are happy to provide hospitality. And there are others that aren't. Are we going to lump everybody here together?
I think the Torah indicates that they're all lumped together, though. That's what we have to accept.
God couldn't even find 10 good people to save.
Right.
So that suggests that the whole bunch were rotten.
Well, I think in a modern world, things tend to be more nuanced than in the ancient world. I mean, I think in the ancient world, there's a lot of good and bad and people sinning and all that, where in the modern world, give people the benefit of the doubt and maybe somebody's not as bad as somebody else. It seems to me in the modern world, there's more degrees of this kind of thing. And in the ancient world, it was more like, good, bad, good, evil, black, white. You know what I mean? That's kind of my impression.
But I think the same thing exists today. Some people tend, if they don't like a certain thing about a group of people, lump them all together and say they're not good.
Oh, you're right. I mean, that's stereotyping.
Yeah, we haven't changed.
That still goes on. But I guess my point is that I think there's more middle ground in a modern world than in an ancient world.
I'm not sure why living in the modern world would inherently like mean that like, because I don't know, like they're like evil people are like a thing that exists in like every time period. You can have like, you could hypothetically have a town full of, I mean, evil people even in 2022. I mean, I don't know, like the sort of internal struggle between humans doing good or bad things seems to be kind of like a timeless thing. So I mean, naturally, I would expect that you could still have a large group of evil people even in like the modern day. That's what that was my sort of impression.
Well, that Gabriel, I mean, that makes sense. You're totally right about that. But I'm thinking like, within current events, even when we're at war, I mean, Russia and Ukraine are at war. Well, not everybody's saying, they're blaming Putin. They're not saying the Russian people are evil. You know what I mean? Where in these biblical times, it seems like it's just painted with a broader brush. I guess is my point,
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. How might Lot's daughters have felt about his offer regarding them?
Probably scared to death. I mean, he says they've come under the shelter of my roof. Shouldn't his daughters be under the shelter of his roof also? It's very hard to deal with.
Do we have any idea how old his daughters were?
The Bible, they could have been 85. I mean, some of these stories.
I don't think so.
I'm going to go with 20s to 30s, most likely.
It says they have not known a man.
Yeah, maybe younger, David, back
They
in
were
those,
virgins because they were
Yeah.
virgins, sounds like.
they might have been 14 or 15 too.
I would go with the younger side like Norma, because people didn't live to be that old.
That's right.
I mean, if you lived to be 40, you were really old.
Yeah,
They probably wouldn't have wanted the daughters if they were 40.
that's right.
It's like real old.
Good
Were
point.
betrothed at a very young age.
They were married off young.
Right.
True,
Sure.
very true.
High Solomon's mother was betrothed at 9 in Iran and married before 14 and had him when she was 14 years old. I met his mother. I mean, she's a little teeny tiny woman, but she was betrothed at 9. He's a member of our synagogue.
Mhm.
All right, let's find out what happens next.
Okay.
Bill, would you read Act 2, please?
Does it start with verse 12?
It does start with verse 12.
Okay, thank you. Then the agents said to Lot, whom else have you here? Sons-in-law, your sons and daughters, or anyone else that you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against them before Hashem has become so great that Hashem has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, up, get out of this place, for Hashem is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law as one who jests. As dawn broke, the messengers urged Lot on, saying, up, take your wife and your 2 remaining daughters, lest you be swept away because of the iniquity of the city. Still he delayed. So the agents seized his hands and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters in Hashem's mercy on him, and brought him out and left him outside the city. When they had When they had brought them outside, one said, "Flee for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, lest you be swept away." But Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lord, you have been so gracious to your servant and have already shown me so much kindness in order to save my life, but I cannot flee to the hills lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Look, that town there is near enough to flee to. It is such a little place. Let me flee there. It is such a little place, and let my life be saved." He replied, "Very well, I will grant you this favor too, and I will not annihilate the town of which you have spoken. Hurry, flee there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Hence the town came to be called Zoar.
And the question?
At what points could this part of the story have turned out differently?
Thank you. Hmm.
The messengers might not have warned Lot that the city was going to be destroyed.
Right.
His sons-in-law might have taken him seriously.
Where did Lot find sons-in-laws for his daughters? Were they people from the city?
Apparently Lot has more than two daughters. Only two of them were unmarried.
Well, of course, it's talking about God's mercy. So in saving them, so I mean, again, that could have been a different result to me because we believe in a merciful God. That's why the results are the way they are. So I think that's significant.
All right, here's your next question. What might Edith, Lot's wife, have been thinking as they left Sodom? What might she have been feeling?
What was the rest of that question? What might,
What might Lot's wife have been thinking when they left, and what might she have been feeling?
oh, okay. Well, sad for leaving her home. Maybe she liked it.
Could have been thinking about her relatives back there who didn't leave with them.
Well,
She
it
could
didn't
also
say
have
that
been
she
worried.
knew, did it, David, that it was going to be destroyed? I thought only Lot knew.
That's true.
Yeah, so she may have just not know why she was going. But I mean, once they got outside, he said, "Flee for your life." But up until that point, she may not have known.
She may have been scared or worried about going into the unknown. Where are they going? How are they going to live? What's their provisions? Those type of things, security.
She didn't know what's happening. She could look over her shoulder, look back and see who was chasing them.
I didn't see what Neil wrote. It got erased too quickly.
It'll be relevant in the epilogue.
Okay.
All right, next question. What might Lot's daughters have been thinking as they left Sodom? What might they have been feeling?
They might have been feeling relieved because I don't think their life in Sodom was so good. I mean, with the way their father was, like treated them with, relative to the guests. So I think they might have been pleased that they were leaving. Their mother, not as much, because, that was part of her family, but the daughters probably were relieved to leave Sodom.
You never know, because the daughters, this may be the only place they've ever lived. And they're accustomed to the ways of Sodom. And they've been scared to go somewhere where they would know what was going to happen.
So much of Genesis is about families leaving to go to other places anyway. So I think it's like a unique take on it, because there's so much of this back and forth in Genesis.
All right, next question. What might Lot have been thinking as they left Sodom? What might he have been feeling?
Well, if he was
Made some-
anything like Abraham, he probably felt that if Hashem said they should go, and these angels were sent there, that he would trust them.
No,
But
he
he
may
was
have been,
raised. Oh, go ahead.
Alan and then Hinda.
yeah, I keep thinking he may have been thinking, I made some pretty bad choices in my life. Maybe I'll get a chance at starting over again.
I'm struck by what you might even call in a way, the realism of the dialogue. I'm not sure this has ever occurred to me before, where he says to the men, every time it says agents or whatever it is, it's just these men who are the angels or whatever they are. Let me escape to this place. It's a little place. It's a little one. Isn't it a little one, he says, which really doesn't add anything. It's just like somebody who is in desperate straits and is just pleading for a refuge. And I just found that very touching. We don't get that kind of dialogue very often. And so what it means in relation to your question to me is he's deeply, he feels desperate, and he, as Alan said, he's questioning his previous choices.
Thank you. Hinda?
Well, Alan covered it.
Great. All right. Why might Lot have delayed leaving? Even the trope, which is a shalshelet, it's a rare trope, only occurs 4 times in the Torah, and every time it indicates hesitancy, the shalshelet, the trope, indicates his hesitancy. So in verse 16, it says, still he delayed, and the agent seized his hands. Why might he have delayed?
I think he may have been thinking about all that he's leaving behind, his house, and furniture, and cattle, and sheep, and everything. And he has to start all over.
Maybe he doesn't trust God, what God said. It's like he's in a state of indecision because he just couldn't fathom that God would really destroy this town that he grew up in, that he moved to, that he chose. He made the intentional choice of living in that place. And so he just couldn't quite get moving. I just don't think that he had much faith in any real sense of the word. Even though he pleads with God, as if God weren't going to let him live if he went to another place, like the hills.
Thank you. Herb? All right, why might looking behind lead to being swept away? So verse 17, flee for your life, do not look behind you, nor stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, lest you be swept away. Why does looking behind lead to being swept away?
Probably because when you look behind, you pause in your fleeing, and that might be dangerous. If you had to really flee fast to get away from whatever was going to overtake you.
Does it also have to do with not having faith in what God is offering you?
Do they know that it's God who's offering them anything? They know these people are angels.
That's true. It may not have been clear to Lot at any point that this was a divine action. Well, up, get out of this place, for Adonai is about to destroy the city. And we are about to destroy this place because the outcry against them before God has become so great that God has sent us to destroy it.
Perhaps God doesn't want the people to see what he's about to destroy. So don't look back.
Okay, let's go into Act 3. Hinda, would you read this, please?
As the sun rose up upon the earth and Lot entered Zoar, Hashem rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah sulfurous fire from Hashem out of heaven, annihilating those cities and the entire plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities and the vegetation of the ground. Lot's wife looked back, and she thereupon turned into a pillar of salt. Next morning, Abraham hurried to the place where he had stood before Hashem, and looking down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and all the land of the plain, he saw the smoke, the land rising like the smoke of a kiln. Thus it was that when God destroyed the cities at the plain, annihilated the cities where Lot dwelled, God was mindful of Abraham and moved Lot from the midst of their people.
Okay, thank you. And our question? At what points could this part of the story have turned out differently?
God could have spared the cities.
Mm-hmm.
In later parts of the Torah, did we get any indication that destroying these cities had a real effect on the evil in the world?
Hard to know, but nobody says, because Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, I'm going to make a different decision. Nobody explicitly says that in the Torah.
So is it thought, David, that Lot's wife was not a good person and that's why she turned into a pillar of salt, or was it just because she disobeyed the orders?
The thinking is something that each person can do. Classical midrashim tend to look upon her, ask the question of why a pillar of salt,
Mhm.
and they tend to come up with some unflattering answers as explanation. But modern midrashim have tended to look upon her more favorably. All right, and the
I
last
see that.
Yeah.
Well, I see that, if I may, that Rashi, I think he's citing or quoting from Bereshit Rabbah, the Midrash, when he says, by salt she sinned, and by salt she was punished. Then he tells a story about how Lot said, give these people some salt, and she said, you've adopted the evil custom of this place, which I found very puzzling altogether, but very interesting, because salt is connected with, in all kinds of ways, with hospitality, breaking bread together and so on. But I don't know anything more about it.
Yes, the story to which Phil is referring, that Rashi is quoting from Bereshit Rabbah, book of Midrash, is that Lot's wife supposedly, or in a story, that she went to all the neighbors and said, can we borrow a little extra salt because we have some guests? Or can we borrow a little extra salt because all of a sudden we don't have enough for everybody who is now eating with us? And everybody's like, aha, they must have guests. Now we will go get them. And so this is an attempt to answer the questions of why salt as her punishment, and how did everybody know that they had guests? So that is where that midrash comes from. All right, so why might Edith have turned back?
Have one last look at her home. Not so uncommon that people do that.
She was ambivalent about leaving. It was more than just a look. She was ambivalent.
She was also not a true believer in Hashem, because Hashem told me, I'm destroying the city, don't you turn around, or something about what happened to it, there's no way that I would turn around. So maybe she just was curious about if in fact God would do something to her. Or she didn't think that anything would happen to her.
And of course, her daughters were still there.
That's right, yeah.
So on that cheery note,
We actually finished the whole thing.
Yay.
Yay.